This whole area here, guys, Yongsan 1 until 6K, have been considered the forbidden city of Seoul for a long time.
I'm talking here about the US Army base, Yongsan Garrison, a Yongsan District right in the heart of Seoul. For many South Koreans, the outer walls of Yongsan Garrison were the only part of the US military base they ever got to see. It was, and in many ways still is, a black hole inside the city.
And if you actually drive onto the base, the navigation doesn't work. It just looks like forest.
Since 2018, the US military has been relocating operations to Camp Humphreys in Pyeongtaek. About 2/3 of the base was relocated then, but some operations are still active today, which is why access remains limited. But during a walk inside the base some time ago, I stumbled upon something completely unexpected. Like, for real, you gotta see that.
But today, access is still highly restricted. You don't enter easily. Not even me, no one else. But there are a few parts of the base, of the former base, that have been opened to the public. And I want to show you those places today. So stick around and join me. Let's go. Alright guys, we're back again. Maybe you remember him, Ron. He was in our Bampodong video. And today we will see parts of the base together. Parts that are open to the public. We're now standing, so this is the National Museum of Korea. I will make a different video about this one later. But from here you can see the base quite well. And the other day we walked over the base, I can tell you, it's not small.
No,
not small at all.
It's quite a large piece of land. You know, obviously they're going to turn this into a park eventually. You know, what's funny is because the relocation to Pyeongtaek, to Camp Humphreys, it was approved in 2003. And it took them, what, 15 years to actually start the move. So they started the move in 2018 and now they're still in the process of moving. Maybe like 10% of the base is still operational.
Okay. Do you remember we had dinner at the Dragon Hill Lodge, right?
We did, yes.
I was surprised that they were asking me for a tip.
Yeah, right.
It's so non-Korean-like.
I mean, as you know, with embassies in Korea, wherever you're in the world, whenever you're at the embassy, you're on the land of that country.
Yes.
Right? So just like the base goes by a US zip code.
Ron is Korean American and served on the base from 2002 to 2004. He worked as a translator for the Korean Navy at the Combined Forces Command. Today, he works as a tour guide.
Translating life, it's comfortable, but being at the Korean barracks, it was tough. So just life is just really hard. There's a lot of beatings. There's a lot of physical punishment.
Okay.
But also a lot of mental punishment. And I experienced all that. You know, you go through the military and you experience all that, and then you get out thinking that you can do anything in life because you've been through that hardship.
It toughens you.
Yeah, it toughens you, yeah. But the military these days, I don't know exactly what goes on. I served 28 months. Now it's only 18 months.
We're now walking the Yongsan Family Park, here visible on the map. But this was once a golf course used by the US 8th Army, until it was given back to the city in 1992. The National Museum of Korea, top 4 most visited museum in the world in 2025 by the way, is also located in the park complex.
What I like about this park is it's not too crowded. I mean, there's nothing too special about it. It's nice nature.
So now we're going to a place that is called the Blackhawk Village.
If our viewers know much about military terms, Blackhawk is a type of helicopter that could carry troops into battle.
Blackhawk Village, now officially named Yongsan Park, is located in the most southern eastern point of the base. Opened to the public a couple of years ago, it was a military apartment complex for senior officers and their families, and probably the closest you can get to an American town feel in Seoul.
That green section, that's where this Blackhawk village is. Right here, this is South Post that we just saw. The National Museum is here. This is Main Post. Yongsangu right here, right? It comprises of maybe 40% of Yongsan. So it's a big plot of land, right?
That's crazy. So this is cool. You can just walk in and at the entrance there are little maps, both in Korean and in English.
Yeah.
And you can see where is what.
Whenever I served on the base, we always said, you know, the air quality in Korea is sometimes not the best. We would say, oh, the air feels so much cleaner in here. It's impossible because we're in the middle of Seoul, but because there's so many trees here, you know, even before Seoul started to build a lot of green spaces, the Yongsan base had a lot of trees. It always felt fresher in here, but you'll see a lot of like things that look very American, like these sidewalks.
And the signboards as well.
The
they look
signboards,
American.
yeah.
The base, from what I've known, is called often the Forbidden City. It's a place where not many people could get inside. How was it for you to go in?
For me, it was something of, I was awestruck by the base. It felt like the US, but also it felt very Korean because there's a lot of Korean motifs here. It felt like a very small American town.
Could you roam around freely?
You could roam around freely, yeah.
What was like your favorite place on the base?
I'm probably, when I was in the military, is Dragon Hill Lodge. We had limits to how many times we can go to the Dragon Hill Lodge per week.
This location has always been of strategic importance for foreign armies. In the late 19th century, during the Joseon Dynasty, Qing Chinese forces were stationed here following a military rebellion. During the Russo-Japanese War of 1904-1905, the Imperial Japanese Army seized Yongsan and turned it into a permanent garrison. Throughout the colonial period, it functioned as the headquarters of Japanese military rule over Korea. After liberation in 1945, US forces moved in, and Yongsan became home to the United Nations Command, US Forces Korea, and the 8th US Army. Interestingly, many dark brick buildings from the Japanese colonial era weren't demolished. They were reused by the US Army, and several of them are still standing today. More on that later.
Look at this scoreboard over here, right? This is reminiscent of American high schools. Oh, this must be baseball because there's a strike. You can see into the room over there by the wall sockets. They're American plugs. Up until maybe the mid 80s, Korea, the voltage was same as the American. And then around the mid 80s, they all changed to the current ones that we have.
As a European, we're happy with that Blackhawk picnic area.
That's one of the things that reminds me of like a small US town. They would have communal picnic areas.
What's up with all the Christmas decorations here?
Because it's Christmas coming up.
Welcome, we're still halfway November. It's cool, guys, because it gives a really good idea how life was here at the base. Houses are still here. Gotta use your imagination a little bit. But this is crazy in a way that when you worked here, it was a secret place for many people, right?
Yeah, it was.
Like
it was hidden.
This was.
Yeah, it was hidden. This
was hidden.
No one knew what the base looked like. If you look at this parking, the space in between the lots,
yes,
is very wide. You don't see this in Seoul. Even the parking spaces look bigger. This is American land. This is America. So they built it with that in mind.
If you also enjoy exploring Seoul's neighborhoods like we do on this channel, please subscribe and like the video. Thank you. Now, it's time for a fun fact. What I found out is that before rock music really took root in Korea, its early seeds were growing inside the walls of Yongsan Garrison. In the 1950s, Shin Jung-hyun, one of my favorite old Korean rockers, was hired to entertain US soldiers by playing American music. Songs that were completely unfamiliar to most Koreans at the time. To do that, he taught himself jazz, R&B, and rock and roll by listening to imported records on bass jukeboxes and tuning in to AFKM, the US military's radio network. I imagine that's how American music slowly made its way into Korea and how the foundation of Korean rock were laid.
What is like the craziest memory you have of your time here at the base?
For the Korean military, you can't leave the base unless you have permission. You can only leave the base for official duties. But when the officers that are on duty are kind of lax, we would sneak out of the base. We would go to Itaewon, right? We would go up Haebangchon, we would go up Gyeongnidan,
have a few drinks,
have a few drinks, and come back at like 2-3 a.m. There was one time I was having chicken in Gyeongnidan. I got a call from one of my fellow military guys.
Yes.
And he's like, hey, the officer's gonna check how many people are in the barracks.
That is crazy.
In 5 minutes, I ran down so hard and I got in just in time to be laying down in my spot before the officer came in.
Oh, you're lucky.
If I got caught, I would go to military jail.
Wow.
But I was in bed wearing my outside clothes.
So Ron and I were now going to a different part of the base that is open to the public, and it's called Ordeni Chongwon. And for that you need to make a reservation, which I did, so we're allowed in. If you want to enter this part of the park, you need to go behind Amore Pacific, the building right here, after you made a reservation, which you have to do a week in advance. And then you shouldn't have any problems going in. So when you enter this park, you have to go through certain security, which basically looks like a airport security.
We had to go through 2 levels of security. The first being the front gate, where we showed our IDs, and then the second where we actually went through a metal detector.
See here, still a few last remnants of the old days. No Korean. How to use doggy pot litter bags. So we're now at the point where we started. That's where we were standing this morning.
Yeah, that's where we saw the baseball field right here.
Exactly, at the National Museum. So when they turn the entire base into a park, as long as they preserve the most important colonial era buildings, some of the American buildings, to preserve the history, the stories, I'm fine with it, this turning into a big central park.
Yeah.
So how cool is that, right?
Yeah.
Just one huge park. And then no high rises, please, just leave it open.
Yeah.
Leave it open, for fuck's sake.
That over there ahead of us is the US Army base. That's still...
That's still in use over there.
Yeah, so the gas station and then the prison is over there. And then you take a right and you go all the way to the Dragon Hill Lodge.
To Dragon Hill Lodge.
Yeah.
The park is in the southwest, and like we said earlier, many of the interesting historical structures are still standing inside the base, just not accessible to the public yet. One of them is a former Japanese stockade, built around the same time as the notorious Sodemon prison in the early 1900s. The surrounding walls still show bullet holes and damage from the Korean War. Near Dragon Hill Lodge, which is still in operation today, you can also spot old Japanese guard posts. And along the Mancho stream, there's an arched stone bridge and stone gate post, just a few of many remnants scattered across the base. But last year, I stumbled upon something completely unexpected during a walk to the Dragon Hill Lodge, where I was supposed to have dinner. This one really surprised me. Check this out.
We found North Korean propaganda leaflets.
Oh, you bet.
That is cool. Very hard to find a public point from where you can see a big chunk of the base. But if you go to Itaewon, to the Yukwan Soon Memorial, there's a little platform. I'm standing it right now, from where you can see a huge part of the main post. You see some colonial buildings already over there. There's Haebangchon, Namsan, and now with winter coming, the leaves are dropping on the ground, and you will see more and more of the base. So this is where you have to come if you want to see a big chunk of the base. Come check it out, especially around sunset. Look at this, beautiful.
By now, you can probably imagine how Yongsan Garrison functioned as a kind of little America inside Seoul. Schools, churches, bars, fast food chains, supermarkets, an entire parallel world, layered on top of Korean history and symbolic of foreign powers setting foot on this land. Honestly, I can't think of another major city in the world where a place like this existed, right in the middle of the capital. I hope that Koreans and foreign visitors alike will eventually be able to explore all parts of the former Yongsan Garrison, and sooner rather than later, if you ask me, as long as these historically important buildings are preserved for once. I never served here, I'm from the Netherlands, but I did genuinely love to hear from people who worked on the base or lived nearby. What was it like? On my map, this place goes down as Seoul's forbidden American city. Thanks for watching, welcome to my dome.